Hey, welcome. Today we're going to tackle a huge question. A really big one. Where did the state even come from? This massive institution that pretty much shapes all of our lives. We're going to try to unravel that whole story by digging into the evolutionary theory of the state. All right, so let's just dive right in. For literally centuries, some of the smartest people have been scratching their heads over this. Did a god create it? Did some powerful warlord just take over? Was it a social contract? The origin story of the state is, no joke, one of history's great mysteries. The first answers people came up with were pretty simple. Some said, well, it was God's will, a divine creation. Others were more cynical, arguing it was just pure force, a strong conqueror beating up on the weak. But the theory we're looking at today has a completely different take. It says the state wasn't made, it grew. And this quote from political scientist J.W. Garner just nails it. The idea here is that the state wasn't some single event. Instead, it was this long, gradual process, an institution that evolved naturally, over countless generations, just to meet the changing needs of humanity. So, if the state just grew, what did it grow from? What were the ingredients? Think of it like a recipe. The evolutionary theory suggests that a few key factors, all developing over a long, long time, eventually combined to form this thing we now call the state. And here they are. According to this theory, there are 5 crucial ingredients in the recipe for a state. You've got kinship, religion, property, force, and last but not least, political consciousness. We're going to break down every single one to see what part it played. Okay, let's start at the very, very beginning, with what you could call the absolute seed of the state, kinship. This is the first, the most basic element in this whole evolutionary story. Think about it. Before anything else, what united people? Family, blood ties. Kinship was the original social glue, right? It was that thread that wove individuals together into a group. For early humans, it was pretty much the only organization they knew. And right here in the family, this is where you see the very first sparks of governance. The simple family structure, the authority of a parent, the obedience of a child, that contained the germs of government. And as families grew bigger, into clans, and then into tribes, that basic idea of command and obedience just scaled up, laying the absolute foundation for what would become the state. So, kinship planted that seed. Awesome. Next up, let's look at the forces that helped that tiny little plant take root and grow, anchoring it deep into society. See, as groups got bigger than just a few families, kinship wasn't quite enough to hold everyone together. That's where religion came in, acting as this powerful, cementing force. Shared beliefs, worshiping common ancestors, rituals, all of this created a sense of unity that could bind thousands of people, making those social bonds even stronger. And you gotta remember, this was a world without science, so things like floods, storms, earthquakes, they were terrifying and totally mysterious. Religion and magic gave people explanations, and the folks who could supposedly understand or control these forces, the priests, the shamans, the elders, they gained a ton of respect and authority. This just helped lock in that social hierarchy. Okay, this next ingredient was a total game changer for human life, the idea of property. And we're talking specifically about owning land. This shift was so critical because it took people who were always on the move and anchored them to one specific place. You can kind of see this evolution happen across 3 stages. First, early humans were nomadic hunters. Then, they became herdsmen, kind of semi-nomadic, following their animals around. But the real revolution? That was the agricultural stage. Farming forced people to stay put, to take care of their crops. And this had a huge consequence. The second people settled down and started farming, they became tied to a specific piece of land. And that created 2 new, really urgent needs: a way to defend that land and some kind of authority to settle the fights that were bound to happen over who owned what. So the key here is that property created the need for formal rules and for rulers. All right, let's keep building on this. Now we've got people settled in a territory. The state that's starting to form now needs some muscle, some structure, a way to organize itself. And that brings us to force and politics. Now, when we say force here, we're not just talking about random violence. This is about the organized use of power. As these societies grew, they had to defend their land and their food from rivals. This constant need for an organized defense is what led to armies and military leaders. Let's be real. The ancient world was a chaotic, dangerous place. In that kind of environment, your survival really depended on strength. So it's only natural that people would rally around the strongest warrior, the best military leader, for protection. And over time, that focus of power on one person often evolved into the institution of monarchy. And here it is, the final and, you could argue, the most important ingredient: political consciousness. This is that moment when people stop thinking of themselves as just a tribe following a chief, and they start to get that they're part of a system with rights, with obligations, and a formal government structure. It's like this collective light bulb goes on. It's the shared feeling of ruling and being ruled. Once that shared understanding really took hold, the transformation was complete. The group had evolved from just a simple society into a true political state, with all the key pieces finally in place. So let's pull all these different threads together. The evolutionary theory gives us this picture of the state, not as something that was invented, but as a complex organism that grew and adapted over centuries. Here's a quick recap of that whole journey. Kinship gave us the basic idea of government. Religion provided the unity to hold big groups together. Property locked people into a specific territory. Force created an organized defense. And finally, political consciousness built the formal system of rights and rules that holds the whole thing together. So if there's one thing to take away from all this, it's this. The state wasn't built in a day by some king or some god. It's the result of a slow, steady, natural evolution, shaped over thousands of years by the most basic needs of human beings. What this theory really shows us is that the state has always been a work in progress, always adapting to new challenges. And that leaves us with one final thought, right? If things like kinship, religion, and property were the big drivers in the past, what forces are shaping the state's evolution today? Things like technology, globalization, climate change. What will the state look like in the future because of them?